Me sinto.
Me vejo.
Me formo.
Existo.
Me sinto.
Me vejo.
Me formo.
Existo.
Me sinto. Me vejo. Me formo.
Existo.
Me sinto, me vejo, me formo, existo. Agora e por mais 30 anos, e 30 anos depois disso.
Me apresento e me represento como arte, carne, corpo e movimento. Me sinto.
Me vejo.
Me formo. De todas as formas, existo.
Sobre algo que você tem dito nas apresentações do filme aqui, você disse que a sua mãe foi a sua primeira atriz. Quando criança você filmava ela no banheiro, na cozinha, fazendo coisas cotidianas. E eu acho que quando a gente vê os filmes como Girl e o Close, a gente percebe essa presença desses momentos muito íntimos que contam muito da história dos personagens, dos seus protagonistas. Eu queria que você falasse desse processo desde o início, quando você começou a filmar a sua mãe, e como isso foi influenciando no seu trabalho como diretor.
So yeah, it's true that at the age of 12, my mother gave me this camera, and I think, I mean, I feel like I need to give a little background to my mother first. She is actually the first artist that I ever saw at work. Because she's a teacher, but in her free time she would paint. So when I was a kid, I was sitting next to her while she was painting, and I was observing how she used creativity to transform everything that was happening on the inside. And also how she was on a constant level looking for beauty. I think that was what she was doing when she was painting, is that in using color, in using lights, she was trying to look for beauty. And so that is something that I saw with her from a very early age. And I think I also immediately have to give you this background that actually cinema is my plan B. I didn't want to be a filmmaker at first. I wanted to be a dancer. So when I was very young, my mother would drive me to all of these dance classes, R&B, ballet, modern dance. And then there was this moment at the age of 12 where where we went with our school, we went to the seaside for a week with our full school. And on the last night we could all perform this little performance. And I chose to do a dance solo to Christina Aguilera's Fighter, which was kind of amazing that I dared to do that, but which was also, unfortunately for me, the start of shame. Because in that moment when I did that solo for my classmates, I realized how my way of moving and my mannerism embarrassed them deeply. Because it was considered feminine, the way that I moved. And actually, I remember coming back from that trip and telling my mother, like, I don't want to go to all these dance classes anymore. And so I stopped dancing publicly. I still continued to do it in private between those four walls of my room with my Discman. And I think maybe that's also the reason my mother gave me that camera, is because she felt like what I was always able to express through dance and not expressing anymore, maybe I could express it in another way. So I have a very smart mother, as you can tell, and an amazing one. And from the moment she gave me that camera, it was like it glued itself to my body. It's like I didn't let go of it anymore. I started to create decors, I started to create costumes, and I started to direct. I started to follow my mother around the house, my brother as well. If there were nephews and nieces, they would be my extras, and we would have much more like production value if they would come. And that is the way I started to express myself at that age. Just by using that camera, by writing those stories. And I think it was also my way of escaping reality, a reality in which the body I was born in came, as I understood, by that Christina Aguilera fighter moment, with a lot of expectations and codes and norms that I wasn't able to live up to. And so I told myself at a young age, unfortunately, that I needed to live up to them. So actually I started to become, in my personal life, I started to become this meme artist who wanted to copy all of the boys around me, and in order to belong to them, in order to be like them, in my personal life, started to portray parts of myself in order to belong. So you had that in my reality, but then you had film always allowing me or giving me this space to escape. And then, I think that during my puberty, when I went to the cinema and all of a sudden I was confronted with a film like Brokeback Mountain, where two cowboys fall in love, cinema wasn't only a place to escape anymore, it was also a place to confront desires that I hadn't confronted up until that point. And so cinema slowly got this other meaning for me, because all of a sudden it was also this place where I could deeply connect, maybe more than in my reality. So I looked for films that I could connect to. I discovered the worlds of Chantal Akerman, Wong Kar-wai, Pedro Almodovar, and so many others. And in many ways, they gave me the key to not only personally, but also professionally come to terms with who I was and what I wanted to do. In that sense that I understood by watching all these films that the films I wanted to make would be about my perspective as a young person, feeling the conflict between my body and societal norms and pressures. And so from there on, I went to film school and I started to develop the writing and develop this language of cinema that I would consider a very, between characters, very intimate, like you say. Intimacy, or the lack of intimacy, often is at the center of it, because I feel like physicality was always something, for example, that I denied myself as a young person. I didn't allow myself to go into intimate physical relationships with other human beings, because I had this armor on that said, like, don't enter. don't enter here. Because it was safer for me to be that way. And so I feel like now, in the writing and in the making of these films, I feel like I look upon all my themes through that lens, with physicality in mind. But also, and this you only realize after making 2 films, is that the dancer inside of me is much more, is a lot at work, actually. Because when I write scripts, I think I write more like a choreographer than I write like a scriptwriter. These pieces are very much related, very much focused on body language, ways of looking, much more than they are based on dialogue. So actually, if you would be radical, you could also consider them dance spectacles between people. Yeah.
Então eu queria que você falasse um pouco da questão dos seus protagonistas, que são muito jovens, as histórias que você criou, tanto no Girl como no Close, são sobre protagonistas muito jovens. Eu queria que você falasse como foi o trabalho de criar esse universo desses personagens e também sobre o casting, né? Como é que foi achar esses atores, essas atrizes mirins, e como foi trabalhar com eles para extrair deles o que a gente vê na tela, de tanta intimidade, tanta presença desse universo jovem que às vezes é tão difícil de trazer para o cinema.
Yes. Well, I think that, I mean, of course I talked about the origin of why I wanted to be a filmmaker just now, so the roots of that origin are in my own young being. I also strongly believe that as a young human being, you experience the world for the first time. And as you experience society for the first time, I think there's a lot of things happening all at once. There's the beauty of that, but there's also in many ways the brutality of it. To be confronted with a society that is divided in groups, each with their own labels, norms, expectations. That is something that you realize and understand for the first time being young. So I'm always drawn to this young, or up until now I've been very drawn to this young universe. I've been very drawn to young protagonists. Because I feel like that confrontation is exactly what I wanted to show, so exactly what I wanted to make with Girl and Close. Yeah, choosing, I mean, of course when you work with young people who've never acted before, casting is an incredibly important process. For Girl, it was very, very complicated because Girl started out as a documentary. The first idea for a Girl was to make a documentary based on the life of Nora Monsicor, who is a dear friend of mine and a young trans ballerina. But for many reasons, the idea of a documentary didn't work out. Also because Nora felt uncomfortable being filmed at that moment in time. She was still transforming. She was still, the relationship with her body was still so complicated that being filmed at that moment in time was impossible. And so slowly we decided to make it into a fiction. But then of course we needed a young protagonist that could embody not only the trans identity but also the identity of dancer and could act on that level. So we did this big castings and nobody that came fitted all these roles. And so then, during one of the dance castings, because we started to work with Sidi Ladbichet, who we choreographed that film, there was this young person who came called Victor Polster, very angelic, androgynous appearance, who had this sensibility that immediately struck us. And it's like we felt this, like something we had never felt before when seeing a young person. We felt like all these layers of the part came together. And it was actually also my first time working in the combination of someone who'd never acted before and a professional who had. And so we started to rehearse. It was my first time rehearsing, and actually our way of rehearsing was a lot by creating very daily moments. Like very daily, like we did a lot of stuff together. We never rehearsed concrete scenes. We never did readings of the script. We never did any of that. We just created intimate daily moments. We made dinners together, we went walking together, all these things. And sometimes informally we would talk about the film. And I think what the beauty of that is that there were many things coming to life and coming to exist. Is first of all, they started to create these bonds together that you wouldn't get maybe if it would only be about work. Like, because it was also so much about the personal, their bonds became really, really strong. And also, bit by bit, by telling me in an informal way, of me telling them in an informal way some things about scenes, they would understand bit by bit, or get the confidence bit by bit that they know what this film is about. And I did a film school that combines documentary and fiction. So when I was in film school, I always made and short documentaries and short fictions. So I've never made the division between the two. And so I think when I'm on set, I also try to look for a form that is neither one nor the other. So, I mean, I can't go around the fact that we're a fiction set because you have 60 people, some with lamps, some with boobs, like, I can't hide the fact that we're a fiction set. Yet everybody knows that I want to approach set like we are shooting a documentary. So for example, in Girl, I don't know if you saw it, but I'll give a concrete example. You had these scenes with, when she gets private tutoring, but she has a private teacher giving her classes. None of that is scripted. There's not a single word in those scenes that is on paper. It's just, I chose a dance teacher, and I chose Laura, and I put them together in a room. And because they were together, it worked. I'm also a bit sick, so sorry.
Ele foi testado, tá?
And that was like, that was really beautiful, that in the combination of those people, those scenes started to come to exist, music like this.
Vamos fazer uma pausinha só para ele recuperar a voz? A gente já volta.
This real dance teacher, because she's not an actress, she's a dance teacher, and Laura, these scenes came to life. And so that's a very different approach of being on set, is that you create, these are documentary moments that you start to film with a fiction team. The same goes for clothes, is that we chose the boys out of 580 children. And then when we started working with them, we rehearsed in the same way. We created very daily moments. They got to know each other very well. And then when we were on set, we would always give them the freedom to move. We would always give them the freedom to express themselves, while also really sticking to the frame that we needed. So there would be this play between improvisation and very structured, decided mise en scène. And so this balance between documentary and fiction is something that I really love to investigate and love to look for with young people.
Eu queria agora que você comentasse um pouco sobre as similaridades entre o Girl e o Close. Acho que a gente percebe muitas coisas, mas eu queria saber do seu ponto de vista, quais são as coisas comuns que você vê entre os dois filmes?
Yeah, I think what is common for me, or what I can see is common, well, there's plural things. First of all, it's two young characters for whom the body that they are born in comes with all these expectations and norms and codes that are a source of conflict. So that for me is something that I see coming back in both portraits of young people and, for me, portraits of our society. What I also see coming back is, and what we always try to do when we write scripts, is that we try to be good to all our characters. That means that I don't strongly believe in this idea of protagonists and antagonists that we're presented a lot with American cinema, the hero and the bad guy. It's hard for me to represent the world that black and white. That's why I think we always choose protagonists that are very human and very flawed, and I think don't make questionable decisions, and antagonists that aren't just there to be evil and give us conflict. I think our antagonists are in many ways as human as the protagonists are. So for example, in the relationship with the parents, I feel like we choose parents that are refreshingly warm in this type of film, because a lot of the times when you make cinema with people for whom identity is a source of conflict, parents often are the ones that don't understand or have difficulty with it. And I think in both our films that is not the case. The parents are, let's say, warm, but at the same time there's a sort of non-communication, there's a sort of impossibility to really speak between these young characters and their parents that is a part of this relationship. Because I find that to be a more complex thing, is that sometimes from both sides we don't have, especially because when we're young and we're experiencing the world for the first time, and we feel all these things just new, shame, love, desire, complexity, guilt, we are not always able to express them, especially not to our parents. And vice versa, as a parent, I love to be generous to parents, but in my case, I don't know if they always had the vocabulary or got the vocabulary to speak of these difficult topics. So that is also something I see coming back. And again, I think choreography in mise en scène has been something that interested me because of that lost dream of the dancer. And so when in Girl, of course, choreography was very literally used, was very concretely anchored in the story. I think in close, it is used in a much more, let's say, abstract way. There is this choreography of movements contradicted with the rupture of time standing still. So there is this sort of, I do feel like Close uses choreography in a much more abstract, much more poetic way than Girl does. Both films, I think, talk about violence. I think they talk about the violence of conforming. The violence of conforming to what we think society wants from us. Violence of conforming to a group. I tend to hope to think that we use that theme not in a provocative way, but in like a sort of in as poetic as we can use it. But that is subjective, so I won't say that as something stated. It's just something I feel, because even though I have the urgence and the necessity for me to speak about that theme, I also know that it's a difficult theme to speak of, violence. Especially like violence that turns inwards, it's hard. It's hard to talk about that. And then, if to conclude, I think that in many ways, what I see in both films is exactly what my mother tried to do when she was painting. Is that even though sometimes we talk about the shadows of life, we continuously and constantly try to look for beauty in lighting, in color, in mise en scène, in a sort of hopefulness also that reigns through the films. I do feel like we try to look for sense of beauty.
E você tocou num assunto que me chamou a atenção, porque os seus personagens masculinos são muito carinhosos no filme. A gente não está tão habituado a ver pais, irmãos sendo tão afetuosos como nos filmes que você fez. Então eu queria... Tá escutando direitinho? Então eu queria que você falasse dessa construção dos personagens masculinos do filme, principalmente os personagens de família, que rompem essa expectativa que a gente costuma ter dos personagens masculinos serem mais violentos, serem mais agressivos ou serem mais duros.
Yeah. Well, it connects to this idea that I said of wanting to be good, not only for the protagonists, which as a script writer, when you read all these script writing books, these American script writing books, it always says like, the protagonist needs to be the hero and all good, and then the antagonists need to be sources of conflict. And I feel like because we laid that down, because we try to go other ways, I feel like choosing tenderness for the antagonists feels like a political choice, because it feels like therefore, because we choose tenderness, it becomes this sort of choice how to represent the world also. And show to an audience that tenderness is actually possible. It is possible to surround someone with vulnerability. And actually I think that if I look around myself, when I was growing up, I was surrounded with tenderness. So actually the source of conflict didn't need to come from around me. Still, I felt the conflict so strongly. I think that a lot of people confuse sometimes that conflict comes directly from the world around, while actually these notions, these codes, these societal expectations we talk about, they are much more deeply rooted in a profound layer of our society. And I think what I realized growing up is that actually everyone around me was dealing with these pressures. My father was dealing with these pressures. His father never talked to him about emotions. His father never, didn't give him the vocabulary maybe. So my mother is a woman who deals with the fact of, the pressures of being a woman in society and being expected to take care of her two children and be just that sometimes. So I feel like in realizing that all these people around me actually were maybe in a very different way than me, but also going through this world, being in this world with all its pressures and expectations, made me realize that I wanted to make films in which all these characters are human and connected in that way. If I look at the example of Close, for example, Close for me is a film in many ways about masculinity, and a film that starts off with this tender, sensual, intimate friendship between two young boys, one that we have rarely seen on screen. We only see this type of imagery when the film really is centered around their sexuality. And that's not to say that they can't be queer, but it's to say that I don't know if they're queer. They might be, but actually what they share at this moment in childhood is a deep, intimate, profound love, is a deep, intimate, profound connection that in our society we immediately want to try to understand it. So we immediately want to try to label it for whatever it is. And so that was important for me to portray that intimacy, but then in that same film that talks about intimacy, to also, and masculinity, to also treat the other characters in an interesting, complexer way than we so often get them portrayed. Like a big brother, for example, in a coming-of-age film, let's say this is a coming-of-age film, 90% of the times, it is one that comes into the kitchen, bumps his brother on the arm, like hits him on the head, and then leaves. And I don't know. That is such a one-handed, one-sided, and also kind of violent way to represent the big brother. And so when we think of that, when we're writing, we're like, oh no, we're gonna have this brother be like protecting and warm, and even lay next to his little brother in the bed and take him in his arms when he feels he needs it, because A, that's what I feel like we need to see, and B, because I feel like there's a lot of big brothers that are like that. So why have we only decided to represent those who don't do that? And there are exceptions, of course, but I'm being radical to make a point. Same goes for fathers. When a tragedy hits in a film, so often it will be a mother who we see publicly confront her emotion, and a father will be the one that is more distant with it, more restrained. And actually that is exactly the reason why we decided very early on to do the exact opposite. So I feel like it's about changing these codes, changing these ways of looking. Sometimes confronting with the way we have been looking, so sometimes stereotypically show a way of looking, but then also using this moment, because you get 1 hour and 40 minutes, to show other types of characters and often choose tenderness as a political choice and as a possibility. So for all the big brothers that are sitting in this theater, that maybe somehow they feel connected because they feel like they have been betrayed for a long time, only showing that one side of possibilities linked to their identity, and if not, showing them a possibility. So, yeah, I think it is the most, that question is the most political for me, because it's about political choices and making political choices.
E falando do seu... E falando de irmãos, você trabalha com o seu irmão, né? Ele é seu produtor. Eu queria que você falasse um pouco dessa relação de trabalho também com ele, e como essa relação íntima de vocês atua dentro dessa relação de trabalho.
Well, he gives me everything I want, so that's great. No, he doesn't. Well, my brother and I are very different and at the same time very similar personalities. So we grew up together, and what was very special and maybe also kind of heartbreaking is that my brother was also someone for whom the body he was born in came with expectations that he wasn't able to live up to. So I didn't only experience that at a young age for me, I also experienced it for my brother, who was 2 years younger than me and who actually had to change schools because of it. So I was a little bit of this, although feeling this myself, I also was a little bit of a protector over my younger brother. And so when our mom, and again I'm heading back to this, but when our mom gave us that camera, it was something for us to do together. It implemented already a collaboration between the two of us. And I think we have always been incredibly horizontal. Like we've never had this idea that one was more. I never looked down on him. I never looked up to him. It had always been really, really horizontal between the two of us. And so when I was 18 and I went to film school, he was still in the high school that we both went to, a very Catholic high school where we both had to wear costumes. Like we both went in like khaki green to school, which was kind of horrible because that's not a fun color to be dressed in constantly, daily. And so when I went to film school and he was still in Catholic school, he was like, let me help you in any possible way possible. So when we shot short films in school, he would also always come on set and be like, he would help with costumes, or he would help with extras, or he just wanted to be a part of it from early on. And what I realized is that this was so organic for us to do this together. Because we have been doing this since we were 10 and 12, it was the most organic thing for us to be on set. We didn't even need one word to understand each other. And so when I finished film school when I was 23, there was a producer who was in our juries, the juries for our master short films, who came up to me and who said, if you have an idea for a feature, I would love to be your producer. So lucky me. I mean, that doesn't happen a lot. So I was like, I have an idea. I didn't have an idea yet, but I was like, I have an idea. And he said, okay, come to pitch it in my office one of these days. And so I went to him, and actually, at the age of 18, I had cut out this article of this trans ballerina out of a newspaper because I felt there was something there that I wanted to be behind, that I wanted to portray. I felt a sort of connection to her story that I felt was interesting. I had also felt like this was not a short, this needed to be a feature. And so I went into his office and I pitched him this. I pitched him this film, and we made it. We made it together. And because he is, I'm not gonna say old, he's not old, but he wanted to retire after this film. So he has had a long career. He has made like 50 or something films. So he announced in Count to me that he wanted to stop, that he wanted to retire. And actually it was an ideal moment for my brother to come on. As he announced that he was going to retire, I said to my brother, like, I'm gonna be without producer, and I know how organic it is for us to work together. Why don't you continue to produce our films? And so my brother was very excited about that idea, because also where our characters really are very different is that he's very good in organizing. Like, he's an incredible organizer. I'm so messy. I'm like a chaotic mess. And so when I told that to my former producer, he said, okay, you know what? I will take him under my wings. We will produce the second film together. I will learn him everything that I know. And that way, afterwards, you can continue with your brother, and he will have all this knowledge. This guy is amazing, right? And so that's what happened. So he told my brother everything that he knows, and my brother produced this film. And it was incredible to work with him, because sometimes in a pre-production of a film, I want everything, you know? I want the walls painted blue. I want the characters there every day. I want 170 days. I didn't get 170 days. I got 32. But, so you want everything, and you have a producer on the one hand that tries to, you know, from a budget point of view, give you as much as he can. And because it's my brother, I know that he will give as much as he can. So there is this confidence completely that when he says, we're at the end, that I know we're at the end. There's nothing more possible. And also, sometimes you will have I would say, a spicy conversation. But because it's your brother, the moment after, like 10 minutes after, you can be drinking spicy margaritas and just not even thinking anymore about that. So there's a beauty in that collaboration. There's a beauty in knowing each other for such a long time. And also being there since the beginning on that horizontal level. It has really been incredibly beautiful to make this film together. Also because I know that thematically, this film really hits deep for him.
Acho que se alguém quiser fazer alguma pergunta, a gente pode já abrir para vocês. Tem alguém que quer perguntar alguma coisa?
Wait, do I keep this on? You're supposed to have a mic, I hear. You don't have a mic just now, but
primeiro, parabéns pelos filmes e obrigado por estar aqui. Estou falando que teve uma conversa recente que você teve com a Celine Sciamma, na qual você perguntou para ela sobre essa colaboração para escrever roteiros. E os seus 2 longas foram co-escritos, né, com outra pessoa. E eu fiquei curioso para saber, tipo, da sua parte, como que funciona essa colaboração e também do close. Porque você deu o exemplo do Girl, do close eu também fiquei curioso porque tem várias cenas com várias crianças, inclusive, que eu senti bastante essa essência do slice of life, que o que você está falando, né, da mistura de ficção com documentário, e eu fiquei curioso para saber, tipo, quanto que você delimita isso, especialmente quando está com mais crianças nas cenas da escola, como que você delimita, tipo, se delimita o tópico, esse assunto, se aquilo está muito roteirizado, qual que é essa dinâmica do roteiro com o que vai para a tela do diálogo das crianças também. Obrigado.
thank you. So my co-writer, he's a very good cook. So that, first of all, always choose a co-writer who's also an incredible cook, because it's really, really great. So we spend a lot of time actually cooking and talking. So we cook and we talk. And I feel like so much of our writing happens there, you know, in the kitchen. Much more actually than sitting at a table, literally writing. I feel like that is like 10% of our time, and making soups and like whatever dishes is 90% of our time. What is great about him, he's called Angelo Thijsens, and what is great about him is he's an actor, and when he doesn't work with me, he is a dramaturge for a theater company called Ontroerend Goed. That's a very Flemish name, I'm so sorry. Who makes incredible, and I really don't say this because I want to do promo for him, but they make incredible theater pieces. Also very linked to identity, very linked to rituals, very linked to groups. And because he's a dramaturge, he very much thinks this way. So when we start talking, and when I start describing what it is that I would like to do, actually what he does, and sometimes it can be annoying, but I know he does it for a good reason, but he asks me to reformulate what I want to say again and again and again. Because in the beginning what I will say is quite general. And then when he will ask me to rephrase exactly what it is that I want to have said, he confronts me and he pushes me towards being precise about something and not just saying this general thing. So that is, first of all, that is very important for me in the writing. I am also really happy that writing for me can be a dialogue and not a sort of monologue intérieur. So like something that I only do by myself in front of my desk. That lonely, sometimes romantic idea of writing, it doesn't really fit me. Like I need to speak with people in order to understand what it is that I want to do. So after this reframing, after this rephrasing of things, we will start to come up with a dramaturgy, because this is what we do. And so, for example, for Girl, the first thing that was on paper was a drawing, and it was a spiral. It was like this spiral movement. Actually, also a sort of reference to Sleeping Beauty, when she goes like in the tower and she's things herself on this thing, on this spinning wheel. So this spiral in which things start to move faster and in which you feel like you're trapped, this for us was the dramaturgy of Girl. And actually we translated it very literally to the choreography. If you observe Girl closely, the dancers only do one thing. They turn around their own asses, or they turn around like in circles. Like the idea of a spiral is omnipresent in that work. Then for Close, the dramaturgy quickly turned out to be a film in 2 parts that broke midway. If we would have shot on film, it would be like the film material broke midway and that they needed to put on another reel. Because we felt like there was a part of fragility and there was a part of brutality. And that the part of brutality would slowly start to corrupt the fragile, tender world of the beginning, and that it would like overthink that language that is set up, and that the tonality would become harsher, darker. I mean, it's all very much, for me, put in the decor, because you have these flowers in the beginning, like these beautiful, colorful flowers that are also this representation of fragility, that then when the machines arrive and this brutal sound start to cut these flowers from the fields, and these colors disappear and make place for this sort of earth brown tonality, there is this literal switch in tonality in that film. So when we have uncovered the dramaturgy, we get out of the kitchen and then we start writing scenes. I think we write much more like choreographers because of that desire to become a dancer than we write as script writers. I'm always very jealous of directors who have amazing dialogues. Like when I watch a Paul Thomas Anderson film, I'm always incredibly jealous, so it's actually not very good for me, because I feel like they are people who are able to express through words very deep meanings of life. I don't think that's the way I write. I think it's also because when I was young, a lot of things happened and were left unspoken. So we start to write this choreography for the actors to work with. Sometimes there will be small dialogues, there will be like parts of dialogues, but not that many, I guess. And then I let the actors read the script. For example, I'm gonna give a concrete example. There's a scene in the beginning of the film between Leo and Remy, where Leo tells a bedtime story to Remy because he is constantly in his head and he's unable to sleep. He's worried and he can't stop his mind. And the story that we had written, script writers, was about a black hole and someone falling into a black hole. Very metaphorical, very like... And so I have Eden coming up to me and he's like, I would never say anything like that. And so I was like, too bad for this dialogue that we had worked on for like a couple of weeks, but never mind, what would you talk about? And he's like, I would talk about a duck and a lizard. And I'm like, well then that's what you should do, you should talk about a duck and a lizard. And actually by allowing him that freedom to do that, I understood 2 things. He was confident enough to do so. He was confident enough to propose things, so I knew he would feel free in the rest of the shoot as well. And second of all, when I was hearing him say that story, I know he had understood the full script. So he had made his own story based on his reading of the script, which is about 2 animals that feel like what they share is seen as different, or as, and they jump on a trampoline together up until the sky in order to just be together. in this intimate bubble that they have. So I was like, this is beautiful, and also this is the language of a 13-year-olds. So why would I give them a paper filled with text that then they would have to rehearse, they would be nervous about rehearsing texts, and then I would get completely different, much more staged performances. So I always try to go away from the stage, even with adult actors. Like, and it's more difficult with adult actors because adult actors are like, let me prepare, let me know exactly what the text is. And I'm like, I'm not going to give you any text. And they're like, in the beginning it's really, really difficult because they feel unprepared. And I have to remind them that the preparation for this role is actually just spending time with us. Is making pancakes, is going to walk to the seaside. And slowly I will inform them about why a scene is the way that it is. And they'll be capturing it. And actually they don't realize a lot of the times that when we're on set, and even if they don't have text, that they know actually why the scene should be the way that it is and actually what they should say. In some cases there is text, like in the example of the kitchen scene where Leo goes to revisit the mother after a long time, and when they have finally this conversation in which something might be said, there is pieces of dialogue that are like anchors to hold on to. With the young people, so we do like, what we do is we do like a trip. We have like a weekend in which we, together with like a whole team, we rent like this vacation house and we do like a scouting, like how do you say that? Like just a trip. And I have all my collaborators, because I have a child coach, I have a script, and so they come with me on this trip, and actually we do a lot of exercises in group. And what I will start to see is I will start to see their personalities. So I will see, this girl is like that a little bit, and this boy is more timid in group, he will not quickly do that. So I start to understand them. And actually when I cast them, I also ask them, what type of role would you want to play in a movie? And like for example, the girl who asks them, are you an item, are you a couple? When she came into the casting and I asked her, what role do you want to play? She's like, a mean girl. I want to be a mean girl. And I'm like, great. Then, and I'm not saying that she's mean in this film, because I think she asks the questions that are on top of everybody's minds. But then I know that with someone like her, she'll be interested in looking for that provocative side to channel. And so what I will do is, well, when we are on this weekend, I will tell her, this character asks these boys if they're together because they're pretty close. So this is what I will do. I will install this idea in her mind, what the script is asking or what the script is implying. I will not tell her, you should say this, you should say this, you should say this. I just say, I think you should ask if they're a couple because they're really close. And then I just put these youngsters together and I let them be free. And then if at the first take we feel like, it's maybe taking this route that it shouldn't, then I will talk with them and I will readdress. But actually they love that because they get the feeling that they get to be co-authors of the piece. They feel like they have this freedom, and I have a lot of confidence in them in order for them to create. They don't feel like they're copying a script, they feel like they're creating. And I think that it is a very active, very confident position for them to have. Of course also because I chose them deliberately for everyone for each piece. But when you choose them well and when you know what their strengths are, then I think you can let them be co-authors of a piece. So yeah, I think the key for me is in being giving them the keys that they need for the scenes, while at the same time not giving them everything.
Hi. You told us about your the references from international directors and from your relationships with your family and other people. How do you work out how to affect international people, how to touch them? Because we're all humans, like Belgian, Brazilians, but we have cultural differences that there are differences. So do you, when you're making your movies, do you think about how the international people are going to react, or do you just think locally and they just magically affect other people in other countries, because your movies travel all over the world, and references, like you said, are from Carbai and Almodovar, other international directors?
Yeah, I mean, there's this, unfortunately it's not me who came up with this, so I'm gonna quote him, but there's this very famous Flemish poet called Herman de Koning. And when he speaks about poetry, he says that for him, the strength of poetry is when the poet starts from a personal agony, but along the way leaves the me behind and starts to look for a universal sadness rather than only that personal pain. And in looking for that universal feeling, he's able to translate what's happening on the inside to a much more broad spectrum, and maybe the universal pain is much easier to bear than the strictly personal agony. And that is what he thinks the Greek meant when they said catharsis, when they used the word catharsis. So when I read that, I'm stuck with this headphone, sorry. No worries, it's an item, it's an accessory. When he said that, I deeply related to that, because I think that is always the thing that I try to do when we're writing, is I start from a deeply personal wound, but then I don't feel like it's that interesting if it only stays that. I feel like along the way, when I'm writing, I think of actually every small piece in there that connects me to all of you, that is shared with all of you. I mean, I start to dissect that personal item into the things that make it universal, like friendship. Friendship is a central relationship in all of our lives, and friendship has given us all heartbreak. It's actually the relationship that gives us the most heartbreak, even more than romantic relationships, because friends we always leave behind. Like, we meet a friend and we leave them behind. Our world is not oriented towards living in friendship. Our world is oriented towards living in romantic relationships. And so friendship always comes with heartbreak. And then, of course, friendships that change, that betray us, that aren't the same anymore because our life takes a different course, that is, I'm not gonna swear, but that is incredibly hard. And so I know that I lived that, but I know that you lived that as well. I know that. Even if, it doesn't matter if you're from Brazil, or from America, or from Flanders, Belgium, we have all lived that. We have all felt guilt at a young age, because that's what happens at a young age. All of a sudden you realize that your actions have implications. That sometimes we do things in this world, and we don't understand completely why we do them, but we know that they're not heroic. We know that they're not the right choice, and yet we do them. Why is that? And I know that that is a feeling of responsibility, of guilt that we all feel, and that so many of us never talk about. It's a feeling that like gets stuck in our bodies, and it becomes this weight, and for some of us that weight gets stronger and stronger and stronger, and we're never able to exteriorize it. So I try to look, that is I think what I try to look, is I try to look for these themes that have no boundaries, that have no countries connected to them, that have no nationalities, that are just deeply human experiences. And for me there is this, yeah, there's this attraction, because then I feel like maybe for some people in the audience, surely not for everyone, because a film will never work for everyone, but that there is the possibility of using the screen as a bridge, that there is the possibility of having someone feel less alone, or having someone feel seen. There's at least a possibility.
Thank you very much. I can really relate to what you were saying, and I wanted to know how you created the deeply emotional scenes. I'm thinking of one of the last scenes between the boy and the mother of the other boy, where, as you also film the faces so close, they have to be really in the emotion because it's so credible. So how do you do that, and how do you work with the camera person if something is improvised and you have to have these close-ups?
Yeah.
Shall I translate it into Portuguese?
Should she translate it into Portuguese, the question, or did everyone understand it?
Yes.
Okay, so this is the thing with a masterclass. I feel like sometimes, and it's only because it's you guys, you have to give away your magic tricks. So, I mean, I could keep them for me, or I could share them with you, and I'll decide to share them with you today because you're all so lovely to come here. So what I do on sets, when there are moments that are deeply emotional, is what I find the art form closely, or the most closely connected to the heart, is music. Or at least for me, I know that when I'm writing, I put on a lot of music because it makes me connect with the heart. And so what I will do on set, and actually there we go again, in many ways what we do takes the form of dance or dance spectacles. Because in the preparation, we will work, or they will tell me about songs that are incredibly important to them, that have this emotional impact on them in all types of registers, happiness, profound sadness. And so I will tell them in moments that it's needed, we will play music on sets. And so for example, in the car scene between the mother and the boy at the end of the film, which is one of the more emotional moments of the film, and where I know that it would be incredibly hard for the actors because they're seated in a seat, so they only have their faces and expressions. They don't have any body language. They have to translate everything through the face. So I will play the music through the car radio, and they will use the music in order to enter the heart and enter the emotion. So actually we shoot, it's a little bit like we shoot silent films, because we shoot images and the sound we have to record after, or when we dim the music. But music is my way, in these very difficult moments, also mostly with young people, because trained actors will dive into a a place deep inside, and they will use that, and they're more used to using that. Like an actress like Emily Dequesne, which is a little bit like our Belgian Kate Winslet. I don't have to give her music. She knows how to dive in there. But someone like Eden, that music helps him a lot. Our magic trick to say is that we used music there in order for him to enter that emotion. And because I've been working with Frank for the last 9 years, and because it's also someone that I chose because he is someone who puts the energy of the actors first. Sometimes you have a cinematographer who's a perfectionist and who wants his image to be perfect. He wants the lighting to be perfect, he wants the framing to be perfect, and he's not able to let go of that perfectionism. And sometimes it will be impacting the energy of the actors, because they will have to wait, or because their frame is very limited. And I chose him because I knew from colleagues that worked with him for a long time that he's the opposite of that. He's also the person who will, when he comes up to me after a take, he will never say the lighting was not great. He will always say, I didn't believe the actors. And so, that is the strength, I think, of our collaboration, is that he can do many things with little sources. He a lot of the time uses natural light, or will use lighting that is set up on the outside of a space, so that the decor, the setting, actually has that documentary feeling to it. He will do everything in his possible force to make the actors feel like they're in a space together, and that we are a lost documentary team on a fiction set. That is incredibly precious to me and incredibly valuable, and it's the only reason why we can create these authentic performances, is because him and his technical team allow the actors to have that space. If he wouldn't do that, then these films would look very differently. I think that, just to say also about emotion, and also because these are two young men growing up, and so they feel the pressures of masculinity also. One thing that I really stressed on plural times during the rehearsals, during these casual dinners, was that their emotion would not be used against them. Because for young boys, they really needed to understand that, I think. They're at that very fragile age where they start to maybe fear that showing emotion is seen as a weakness. Of course it's not, but they are taught to think that way. And so, this is something I had to stress on a lot during rehearsals, is that the script, and in this film, because there is also editing, and because there's also this character to hide in, their emotion would not be used against them. And I think because we spent so long creating this confidence, and because we spent so long creating this intimacy, they also felt confident in showing that. For example, during that time, every time I will have a crew member be a part of that daily routine, so they have met Frank, because my cinematographer is called Frank, way before we start shooting. So he's not a stranger to them. So when he's sitting in the car, and you have Frank, me, a sound woman, and 2 actors, that's a very packed car. These actors know these people, or have known these people for a long time. It's not weird to them that they are there, because we have implemented that idea from the very first rehearsal. There's a camera during these daily moments from very early on. And this camera films us making pancakes. Also to show them that it's not because the camera is rolling that all of a sudden we have to act differently. It's not because the camera is there that all of a sudden we have to start talking in a different manner than we have been talking. And so this idea of documentary, I think we implemented already very early on. So that it's not something that is new on set.
Hi. First of all, I watched Close yesterday. I think you might remind me of the guy that bring the father.
Felipe.
Yes, you remind my name. This is nice. First of all, my old man, aka my father, was really sad after. I just love seeing him that is not like a film maker or a film nerd. Feel so emotional watching a movie. So yeah, I just want to see this first. And the second, as a young filmmaker myself, learning to become a director, I noticed that being like us, I'm a little bit more feminine in the beginning. Sometimes, as a director, people don't trust us as much as example, my friends that are more masculine. I have a feeling that I notice already that my friends that are a little more masculine are more respect in set than I. And I want an advice from you that just now won the Grand Prix. That is basically one of the biggest dreams of every director. How you build your confidence as a director, how you build confidence around us, this world that is strongly masculine and affect us even though we are guys, but we're like more feminines.
Well, I think, I mean, we fear femininity in all its forms. We fear femininity. For the longest time, we have put femininity on a very underneath masculinity. I mean, that's just this patriarchal idea that has been constructed for so long. I feel like when you talk about those struggles, it's the same struggles that women go through in this industry. Because feminine men are, in many ways, maybe somehow, sometimes, considered in that same group as women. But what I feel, and what I have come to understand, is what I saw as when I was young, I always considered my fragility, I always considered my femininity, I considered it a weakness, if I'm really honest. And I know that's not a heroic thing to say, but I did consider it when I was young because I was told to fear it. And I think the big job of my adult life has been to deconstruct that armor and to allow actually that fragility to be my force. And I feel like now it is my absolute strength. I feel like my femininity is my superpower because it makes me make these films that are seen and that make me travel and that make me connect to people rather than shut me off. So actually this construction that I tried for so long of being this form of masculinity with all its characteristics, it actually made me very weak. And so the opposite of what I thought, because it created this armor through which nothing was able to exit and nothing was able to enter. And so I feel like in order to be authentic, in order to make something, you just need to channel your beautiful, powerful energy that you feel inside that can be any energy, but speak in an authentic way. And then sometimes you're confronted with people who still have that armor on and don't want to let go of that armor and have constructed that armor in order to protect them from the world or from themselves. And I always say treat them with kindness, because they have constructed that for a reason. They are macho for a reason. They are protecting themselves from something. And so I always try to treat them with as much kindness as I try to treat myself nowadays, because it's important. Yeah, I feel like you should stand your ground. You should be heard.
Good morning. Me growing up as a queer child, I think that I left a part of me dying between the way because of this difference of masculinity and femininity. And I think about these parts of me that had died while I was growing up, and it affects me a lot. In the film, you choose to represent the suicide theme that is very difficult to talk about, and you choose to talk about between childhood. And I wanted you to ask you why you choose to represent the suicide between childhood.
It's interesting that you use the word died, because I wonder if it has died. I wonder if it's just not very covered with a lot of layers that you created for yourself, because that's what we do. I mean, when we're queer growing up, so often we create all these layers to protect ourselves in, and then the big tasks of our adult lives is uncovering which part of ourselves is created and which part of ourselves is truly us. So I don't know, but you know best, but I would wonder or reconsider thinking if it died or if it just is very, very much covered, with all these types of layers that you maybe can uncover as you go through life as an adult human being. Well, I feel like this film is about a strong, deep connection between young human beings, that because we are boys, we start to learn them from a young age to not value enough in this world. Because the traits that we link to masculinity is independence, competitivity, being more stoic with your emotions. And so from a young age, we learn boys to disconnect not only from each other, but also from their inside worlds, also from their language of emotion. I mean, I read this incredible book done by an American psychologist called Niall Quay, who followed 150 boys between the age of 13 and 18. And of course, that's the strength of sociology, is that when you follow this group of boys, you get to uncover these tendencies in society. And as these boys at the age of 13 talk about their friends like it's love stories, at the age of 18, these boys don't dare to use the word love anymore. They have completely disconnected from that emotional vocabulary. And it's hard and it's brutal. And I feel like this film is about that. It's not only about people disconnecting from each other, but it's also about people disconnecting from themselves. And about that brutality that we so often see in this world done to others. I mean, when I turn on the news, I see brutality between men. I see men fighting out wars with each other. I feel like we wanted to talk about that brutality turning inwards. And all of a sudden having young men not fighting others, but fighting themselves. I feel like this topic is taboo. I feel like self-inflicted violence is hard for us to speak about. I feel like a lot of people reject speaking about it, and I understand why. But at the same time, I feel like it's so omnipresent that not talking about it would be incredibly violent. I feel like this film is also in many ways about the loss of a childhood. And if I look at it more poetically and more metaphorically, it's also this character of Remy who represents that. That very sensual, very maybe idyllic childhood connection that we lose, that we erase from the film. So next to the very concrete layers, there's also poetic, maybe more metaphorical layers to his depth in this film.
Good morning. Congratulations on your film. It was a fantastic experience to watch it on Monday. And I wanted to ask you a little bit about editing, because on the session, the screening on Monday, you talked about the manipulation of time. You talked about how to explore those moments in time through editing. And I want to ask you about your process, how much you're involved in the process of editing, and what's your approach? Taking on it like a more Tarkovsky way or a more Soviet montage? What's your approach, like a more intellectual approach to montage?
So I'm with my editor actually every day. So we edited during 6 months. We have also edited our first film together called Girl. So we have had this collaboration for the last 8 years, in which we really, have gotten to know each other very well and have worked together very intensely. And so I'm with him every day, and we try a lot of different things. The dramaturgy of this film was very difficult because you have two very different parts, and the volumes of everything need to be open, but need to be at the right level of volume. And I think in the beginning of Close, because I was much more insecure making a second film than I was making a first film, it was very difficult for me to be confronted with the material. So I felt like my editor was also a psychologist. He was like treating me with a lot of kindness and making me less insecure. And then I think because we have this language built up ever since the first film, and because we have been working so intensely together, he knows also so many things that I don't need to vocalize about what I'm looking for and what we want. And of course we want this character to be built, constructed in a very powerful, very precise way. And he's one of those collaborators that reads the script before we go on set. And I will talk with him, and he will reflect on a lot of the ideas of mise en scène and a lot of the ideas of tempo. So for example, on the script he will tell me, this tempo feels a little bit too slow, this feels a little bit too fast, and it's things that I take with me when I go on sets, when I work with actors or when I work on temporalities when shooting. I know that a scene that he says is too slow, that I need to find a dynamic that makes it more efficient. And when he says it's too fast, I need to find time lingering between characters in the scene. So that is very valuable to me. And then, again, like Frank, my cinematographer, he's someone that maybe before he says the tempo of this editing doesn't work, he says, I don't believe the actors here. So again, he is someone that with me will look for the most authentic representation in the acting and the most authentic representation of what we want to say on screen. Maybe before he thinks of the editing as a sort of skill, he thinks of all the other elements before that. And that's just the power, I think, of our relationship, is looking for authenticity maybe before looking for showing off what we can do.
Bom, gente, a gente chegou no fim do nosso tempo. Queria agradecer a vocês por terem vindo. And I'd like to thank you, Lucas, for being so open as a filmmaker and as a person.
Thank you so much. I'm so sorry that I'm so sick and that you had to live with me through this moment, but I hope I was still able to give you some things. So thank you all for coming. That really means a lot to me, and yeah, have a great rest of your day.